Hey, it's News from Heaven. Today we're going to be asking, should you love everyone the same? What about people that are using you for stuff, or that seem to be like they're mean, or there's some other problem? What does it mean when we hear religious sounding stuff like love your neighbor as yourself? I don't know. How would I know? But what we are going to do is read some Swedenborg that's related and do some wild speculating. That's what the show is. Like and subscribe if you want to help something like that. Keep going. It matters. Leave comments. Let's get in there and see if we can't have these concepts also untangle the mess of the mind. How do we get out from everything that chokes out the life of our like ability to have a peaceful life? I mean, every worry, anxiety, interpersonal stuff. Can these concepts provide any kind of higher perspective on what's going on that ultimately frees us, you, me, even the people that you don't know if you should be friendly to or not? Hopefully we all get to this place of happiness. That's the point, right? Let's see what we're going to do today. It's going to be New Jerusalem. So check that out. Download it for free. This is number 87 we're going to start on. And we are going to take a look at who's the neighbor and how do you love him and why. Since the sort of goodness in every individual is different, it follows the nature of each person's goodness determines both the level at which and the way at which that individual is a neighbor. Whew. Okay. Right away we're talking about not just a person, but the goodness inside a person. And this is different for everyone. Oh, look at this sentence here. The nature of each person determines both the level at which and the way in which. Those are two distinct things. Because somebody can be more a neighbor than somebody else. And this neighbor thing, if you're not familiar with this idea, love your neighbor as yourself. The neighbor is this term that we use for people you're supposed to help, and we are going to get into the Samaritan story where that maybe is most famously brought up. Level at which and the way in which. The way in which. So somebody can be a neighbor in a different kind of way, like what, that they live in the same metro but not across the street. What does it mean? So somehow we are figuring out the qualifications for the neighbor, which has implications for the kind of way in which we express love to people. We can see that this is the case from the Lord's parable about a man who fell among thieves. This would be the Good Samaritan, whom both a priest and a Levite, these are both supposed to be very good religious people, passed by, leaving him half dead, while a Samaritan, who is somebody from an out group and a forbidden sort of group to interact with, after he had bound up his wounds and poured in oil and wine, lifted him onto his own beast and brought him to an inn and made arrangements for his care. The Samaritan is called a neighbor because his actions were those of a caring person. We can tell from this that the people who are a neighbor are the ones whose lives are devoted to doing good. Did you survive that? That's a lot at once. Look at this. You think the Good Samaritan story is the story about how the person who got hurt, right? The man, where is it? The man who fell among thieves, that's the neighbor, right? And that these guys, priest and Levite, should have stopped to help them because he's your neighbor. You should help somebody in need. But the Samaritan is actually the neighbor in this story. The Samaritan is called a neighbor because his actions were those of a caring person. Jesus says, who was the neighbor in this case? The Samaritan, because his actions were those of a caring person. So right away, we have what makes you a neighbor has to do with how you live, and particularly how you express love, because the goodness in every individual is different, and that is informing how much of a neighbor that person is. So we say love your neighbor. It depends on what what this person is doing for other people. A neighbor is someone whose life is devoted to doing good. So right there, we have, so I wouldn't say like our answer, but we're starting to build something. In fact, the oil and the wine, that the Samaritan poured into the wounds mean goodness and the truth that it shows us. So this, correspondences, right? Oh, do you want to see me draw some vessels? Here's like a little jar you might have oil in. Here's a bottle of, famous warped bottle of wine. And there's a nice label. What a good year that is. These two things are correspondences for what the Samaritan did, the specifics of the charity that the Samaritan expressed to this person who was in need. That's another detail that makes the Samaritan more and more a neighbor. We can see from what has been said thus far that in the broadest sense, goodness itself is one's neighbor. Since people are I just want to highlight this whole thing. I'll do it in a different color. Since people are neighbors according to the nature of the good that they do, which they get from the Lord. So, we have this situation where, you're supposed to love, you're supposed to help people, or really what do we think of when we think of loving? We act friendly towards, lend things when they need it. What do people do these days? Give gift cards to music services or something, and you say, well, but do I do that to this person who's always mean to me, or that is some kind of threat that I really don't want to interact with them, or that they're draining something out of my life, or this person who seems to be harming somebody else? Do I really enable that, lend them the tools to which they can harm this person? Look at the distress in those giant eyebrows. Or there's this person over here, and I don't know anything about them. I don't know what they're like or what's going on. How do I help? What's the neighbor in here? Is it just you just love all these people exactly? If we're extending love, it's just exactly the same to everybody. And here Swedenborg is making the claim that what we're looking at as the neighbor is actually not any particular person, but goodness. And so we're scanning. When we're looking at, we're scanning. How can I best serve the good part in you? So it could mean that in a particular person, you are helping them with certain parts of their life, but not enabling them in other parts of their life. Some people, it could be that I can't right now help you until we start to get some of that goodness to come to the fore. That really, this, which is in essence the Lord, this is what you're looking for. This is what is the thing to be helped. And fascinating to think, because goodness, how can you say, man, I am good, help me, but the next minute, if I start acting in a harmful way, it's not the person, it's the states that we get into. And we're about to break that down in a very satisfying way, in my humble opinion. Further, since goodness is one's neighbor, love too is one's neighbor, because everything good that we do is inspired by love. And I would almost say, you could say, how are you supposed to love everyone the same? Love. Love it when, and by love, we're talking about, sure, the feelings you have, but the effort you put out to enable and support loving things. Isn't that what you do when you go and you're trying to donate to charity organizations? You think, what organization is most effectively doing what I believe is good in the world? And that's what you go support. And then we can be looking for that too. And you can't just write people off and say, well, this person's nothing, because you never know that you can see, this person actually is doing something loving and good here, so I'm going to support that. This means that any individual is a neighbor according to the nature of her or his love, which comes from the Lord. And this is so cool because it's so easy to recognize this in myself, the negative part of this. The fact that love is what makes someone a neighbor, and that we fulfill the role of a neighbor depending on the nature of our love, becomes clear in the case of people whose lives are devoted to loving themselves. Such people recognize as neighbors being the people we want to help and benefit the most, those who love them the most. That is, those who are most closely connected to them. These they embrace, these they kiss, these they benefit, these they call family. In fact, because people devoted to self-love are evil, no offense, that this putting me above the rest of the human race is, as Swedenborg says, sort of the root of all evil. They consider the types of people just mentioned to be their neighbors more than others are. Only if others show them love do they consider them too to be their neighbors. So if I have me at the center of my universe, which, let's be honest, we often walk around like that, or you flip into modes of that. You can't help it, and you think. But then you start to think, so who are the good people? Who are the people I really want to support? Who do I really care about? Who do I really like? It's all based on proximity to me. So if these people do what I want, or these people praise me, or think similar to me, or live the way I want, then it's like, oh yeah, these people are really good. But the further somebody gets from revering and adoring me, or the further somebody gets from, who I know or who I agree with, then we say these people are less and less the neighbor. But it doesn't matter. We're thinking completely me-centric. But as I was saying before, me, Curtis, like I could be great now, but then I can go get into some kind of rut where I'm doing all these destructive behaviors. There's no way I can be the moral center to the universe. What we're being asked to do here, when we're looking out at goodness as the neighbor, and this is really the application. I mean, rather than how do you apply it to other people, you look into yourself and the thoughts and feelings that come up in my own mind. If instead I'm looking for what's actually good and fair and honest and right and true as it exists independent of me, because if we really meditate on it, you can see that this is how it is. You can see that this is messed up, because what if one of these people that you think is distant from you because they're not adoring you, they're not doing what you want, but they actually do love what's honest and fair and treat people equitably and try to live rightly by what they believe, but yet you're antagonistic and hostile to them because they're farther from you. This is a busted system. And I have spent a lot of time trying to make sure dig myself out from thinking like that, These accept someone else as their neighbor then, to the extent that they receive love from that person, and depending on the kind and amount of love they receive, because you can just so tell. There can be, there could be somebody, I don't know if you ever had this, where you kind of have a little bit of a grudge against them. Something about them rubbed you the wrong way, or you have an opinion about the kind of things they do or the kind of person they are, and you allow yourself to entertain some critical thought chatter about them. But then, and this has really happened to me, then you catch wind that they praised you in some way, or they like something that you do, and then suddenly you're like, oh, actually they're all right. Oh, that's cool. I like them because now they are closer in to the me. They're one of the me's. This is not good, because getting into these little circles of we don't care what the actual impact is on the human race, we just care what the impact is on me. How does that work for the human race as a whole? It gets us into a mess. People like this start with themselves to determine who their neighbor is, because the determining and deciding factor is whatever one loves. Let's get to reverse, right? People who do not love themselves above all, though, and this is true of all who are in the Lord's kingdom. The Lord's kingdom, which would be heaven, just FYI, if you want to end up in that state, which becomes a place spiritually after we die, you can love yourself. That's great. But you can't love yourself above all. You can't love yourself above all. And this is a funny reverse on the title, Should You Love Everyone the Same, that I'm just thinking of now, because we go around and we think of, oh yeah, should I extend charity to this person who I feel like I have a problem with or something, but we don't really look at where do we place ourselves. Should we actually love everyone the same, as in just because it's me, just because, think about line cutting. Well, I want to be first. There's a general principle that says, well, that's not fair. It's not fair. These people are already here waiting. So what I should do is really obey the greater principle of good and go to the back of the line and wait my turn like everyone else. That's as simple as it is to not love yourself above all. Instead, you love the goodness of that fair system, and that you can get there and people can get things. That is, get whatever's at the front of the line, water slide probably. That is what it is to not love self above all. That's the mindset of all who are in the Lord's kingdom. And it sounds great when you're talking about people out there. Can you imagine driving down a highway and knowing that everybody driving next to you is thinking about the safety of everyone around them and doesn't consider themselves the most important? Can you imagine being in a world where that's the norm? Doesn't sound so bad. So we got to apply that to ourselves as well. And it is true that you can be looking out and see, like, if you really see a lack of, we have to use our judgment sometimes. If you really perceive a lack of this love for what's good in people, it could be that you're different in the way you approach them, that you are setting rules and boundaries. And if you feel like there's an organization that's harming the world, you don't buy their products, you don't donate to them. So it can be with love with people. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Oh, I did stop right there at the comma. Sorry. So this is true of all who are in the Lord's kingdom. Start in determining who their neighbor is with the one we should love above all. That is, with the Lord. And they consider an individual to be their neighbor depending on the love that individual has for and from the Lord. This does not necessarily just mean how religious are they? Do they go to church a lot? Is that what loving the Lord is? But all this stuff we were looking for up here, goodness, truth, the love of that is the Lord. The Lord is that. When you're loving those things, it's because you're seeing the Lord in there. That all of existence was set up so that we can recognize what love is. All this separateness and things. That when you see elements, two individuals, one making some kind of sacrifice for the other, or extending love, that is a picture of God. And so when we see that is what determines the neighbor. And that's what we're out there looking for. And people would be doing the same for you. And that somebody's not going to have a grudge against you or favoritism. It's just like when you do what's good, we support that because that's what's good for me too. If I'm walking around having love for and from the Lord, or for and from goodness and truth, that's improving my spirit. So really, like, rewarding that in me is rewarding me too, because that is what's going to give me this happy, permanent spiritual upgrade. This makes it quite clear where we of the church, this would be, Swedenborg was sort of a Christian reformer, and he is talking to his audience there. The church can be a state of heart and mind in you if you're trying to live well. I would say you're of the church. So if this makes it quite clear where we who are trying to live well, and not always succeeding, but trying, should start in deciding who our neighbor is and show that people are our neighbors depending on the goodness they have from the Lord. That is, goodness itself, again, is where we should start. Don't make it personal, which might sound strange to say. Look for that love. Look for that love. In fact, the Lord tells us in Matthew, Gospel of Matthew, that this is true. He said to the ones who had done good things that they had given him something to eat, given him something to drink, taken him in, clothed him, visited him, and come to him in person. And this is fascinating. In prison, I mean. And then said that as much as they had done this to one of the least of his people, they had done it to him. These 6 good deeds, understood spiritually, comprise all the kinds of neighbor. That giving somebody drink has to correspond spiritually with giving truth to people who are seeking truth. Food is extending love to people who need love. And there's this cool section on the correspondences of all that. And this brings it around to, so what are we saying in this episode? Just, all these people out here, this is just about don't help them and they're not the neighbor, so let them go and don't worry about it. But there are actually different ways that people need things. Swedenborg has this phrase, discriminate charity, which sounds really bad, but what it really means is, like, be wise about how you're extending service to people. There are times he gives the example of a judge who is seeing somebody who's committed a crime, and actually love in that regard is not to say, okay, well, I'm going to forget that you did it or act like you didn't and let you go. It's actually enacting the law and saying, well, this is the penalty. This is what you got to do, provided the law is just and all that. But in principle, it's for 2 reasons. One is it's protecting. It's love to the rest of the people in society who aren't going to be at risk of being hurt by that person if they have some kind of tendency to do that or could potentially do it again. But then also to the person themselves, that if you're looking at this person and saying, the difference is, because you can just throw somebody in prison and not care at all about their life and not care about them and just think, I'm getting revenge on you. This is justice. You're out of there. But if you're really thinking about how am I going to try to get this person away from the harmful tendencies that are getting them to do that sort of stuff in the first place, there can be love in it. Swedenborg says the difference is you can even defend yourself from somebody who's attacking you and push back and, neutralize. The difference is, would you be willing after that person came to their senses to somewhere down the road offer friendship to them? Or that you actually care how it turns out for them. It's not just you defended yourself and then that's it. That is the way that you can be looking for goodness. And as soon as you see it in somebody, then you're not holding a grudge. You're willing to work with them. Now, that's not realistic in all scenarios. There's not all bridges can be rebuilt after they've been burned, but it's just cool to keep in mind for the little things and then see where it pops up for the big things. So these different kinds of people may have different kinds of needs. At times, this is somebody who needs open affection. At times, tough love. Whatever it is, it's not that the motivation is different, but the expression is different. Always looking for goodness with love and wisdom. And check out sometime the correspondence of these 6 things because it's really cool. And that's the point. We're trying to find out, how do you navigate life? How do you get it to where you can still feel like you're expressing love for everyone, but you're doing it in a way that's not ending up harming you and them and the rest of society? So, again, I said, wild speculation, but hopefully gives us some kind of beacon as we try to navigate this to the best of our understanding. That's the news from heaven. How'd you like it? Like and subscribe. Let me know in the comments. It's a little tricky, this subject. How does this kind of stuff play out for you? Have you ever had spiritual principles like this help you in interpersonal stuff? And and I think the most potent way in any of these situations is, how do we apply it to ourselves? The thing I'm most excited about is looking at the thoughts and feelings that come into me and saying, is this thought, I don't just love this thought. I'm going to go back to my diagram, because remember we had this little me diagram. If you think of all these little dots rather than people as being your own thoughts and feelings, when one comes up, not just loving it, this urge or idea or impulse to do something, not just loving it because it's mine and it's right here and it's got some kind of reward for me, but really look, is this thing the neighbor? Is this thing I want to say the neighbor? Is this activity I want to pursue the neighbor? Is this way I'm living my life? Is that really the neighbor? Is it really trying to be good and true? And in that way, should you love everyone the same? Should you love every thought and the feeling the same? No. You look for the goodness. The goodness is the neighbor. And in that way, God is the neighbor and God is the will to help everyone in the world. Okay, cool. I don't know. I was like, is he going to end the show? He said he was going to end the show. I'm ending it right now. Thanks so much, everybody. Talk to you next time.